So we needed to plan for 275 watermelons. Of the people who feel confident about their homework, who would like to come explain what they did to figure out how many beds of watermelon we need to grow? Anybody?
You want to read mine?
You want to do it, Moses?
Well, this is what I did.
Okay.
Okay, we need 275.
Yeah.
The plot is 150, 150 by 75. And the bed, which is 6 feet. Yeah, okay. So now, we need 275, but assume no watermelon plant.
One watermelon plant.
Yeah, how many is it produce? 3.
One watermelon a plant seems like a good estimate.
How many? 3? As 3 point something, so I said.
I'd say, how many did you end up saying?
I said 3.
3.
How many did it produce?
If they produce between like 1 and 3.
Okay, so
we'll go with 3.
maximum 3. Okay, 3. Okay, so since we need 275, so it's 275 divided by 3 times 1.115. Because we have to get the, so I said, okay, we need 105 plants.
How many? 105? Okay.
Now, and in planting, watermelon 6 feet by 6 feet. Right?
Did they what?
Distance space.
Yep.
6 feet, by 6 feet.
Yep.
And since we have 150 feet row, then I divided that by 6, so we need 25, so to have 25 plants.
Okay, so you would put 25 plants.
So total is 25. So since the plot is 150 feet, and the distance is 6 feet, so I divided by 6 feet, and I get 25. So 25 can fit into 150.
Okay, so you have 25 plants.
Yes.
How did you get to 6 feet between plants?
I researched, I went to Google.
Is there anywhere else you could have found that information? What about this sheet? Because that seems awfully spacious.
I also have some stuff. Yeah, I think.
Can people pull out the sheet that it's either pink or white from last week, and it's called the Greenhouse and Field Planting Guide.
It's also pink.
Will everyone wave that sheet in the air, please? Okay, I need everyone to wave it. I want to see it. Okay, now take that sheet and rip it in half. It's wrong. Rip it in half. Okay. I'm going to give you a new one. I don't want you to have that sheet anymore. Rip it up. New sheet is green. Rip that sheet up, baby. Don't want to see it anymore. Awesome. Like that. Oh, what?
Mommy.
What?
Let's make a mess.
Always. Okay, so this new sheet identifies the spacing between plants. Which just sounds real good. You're gonna keep it for posterity's sake. Okay, now we all have a green sheet. Moses, can you find where it says the spacing between plants?
3 inches.
Okay, so you're looking for watermelon.
He said, according to what I read in that,
Yeah.
if you are planting uphill, it's 3 inches, 3 feet.
3
But
feet.
if you are planting in a row, it's 6 feet.
Okay.
That's why I choose that.
Okay, that's why you choose 6 feet. Okay. On our, you can certainly choose to plant them at 6 feet. I would think that would be a little bit wide, a little bit far apart. On our sheet, it says that watermelon should be planted at 18 inches apart. So that would be 1.5 feet, which is a lot tighter. But we could say 3 feet for the sake of of this. Oh, I wasn't supposed to cover that up, was I, Peter? Okay. Haha, here it is. Okay. So this is 25 plants if they're 6 feet apart. If they're 3 feet apart, how many plants would it be?
That would be.
Yep. So it'd be 50 plants at 3 feet. So if we're going to plant it at 3 feet, and we need 105 plants, how many beds did you decide we needed?
So then the length is 150 feet. So divided by the length is 150 feet. Then 150 divided by 50 will be the numbers of plants in total.
Yep, so if it's 150 feet and it's 3 feet between, you get 50 plants in each bed. Okay. And if we need 105 plants total to get 275 watermelons, about how many beds should we grow?
That's 2.
A little over 2.5 beds? Of watermelon. Jeremy and Zoe, how does this compare to what you came up with?
Pretty close. Like,
It's different?
mine's different because I calculated how many products watermelons will come out with versus planting the seeds.
Okay.
So I just did my math a little different, but I came pretty similar to that.
Okay. So let's Zoe, I want to talk about how you did yours. But let's give a round of applause to Moses first for sharing his homework. Thank you. Or I like to do a round of applause like this. Or the seal of approval, which is like a little seal. Okay. Zoe, what'd you do?
I kept it simple, like the way we did it last week. So
Yeah.
we have 150 beds, and then planting time for the fifth one is now correct. It says that the annual spacing for the watermelons is 18 inches.
Yep.
So that's like 1.5 feet. So I divided 150 by 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 100 plants per bed.
So 150 feet divided by 1.5 feet is 100 plants per bed.
And I assume to get at least one watermelon off each plant.
Okay.
So I guess, we have to be sure they're right.
Yep.
Dates. So.
And you have to eat a lot of them.
And so since we need 275, I rounded it out to 3 beds.
Okay. And you got that because 100 plants per bed would mean how many watermelons per bed?
100.
Yep. So that equals 100 watermelons per bed.
We used probably more before we had harvest to get 275 at a time.
Yep.
That was considerably enough.
Yep. I think that's very smart. So 3 beds.
So let's talk about something.
Yeah.
The width of the bed is 6 feet, right?
Yes.
So the bed is 6 feet, and for the first one, then it have to be 1.5. So we can have 2 for mine with the 1.5.
Because would you be putting 2 rows?
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
2 feet here, 2 feet.
You would be putting 2 rows.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely do that. We recommend to only plant 1 row.
Okay.
And so because there's only 1 row, you can put them a little bit closer together because they've got all the room out to the side to grow. Let's give Zoe a round of applause for explaining her homework. So one of the elusive numbers in this was how many watermelons you get per plant. So does everyone have a seed catalog? Did anyone bring their seed catalogs from last week? Okay. what I will tell you is that if you look up watermelons in your seed catalog, let's see. Okay, so I'm in Johnny's, and I have the watermelon page. It will tell you, each plant gives a different number of fruits per plant. And so it will tell you, let's see, average 3 to 5 fruits per plant, or average fruits.
So what I did was use this,
That's smart.
and I just seen two different. So I calculated it was 1.5, and I just did one.
Yeah. So these, they have to go say how many. So it's kind of right. So they will say, like, here's the average one for this kind, but for this kind is an average 3 to 5. So you always want to check your seed catalog because it will give you important information. Laura. Sorry. So what we're going to do now that we have the last bit of information about our homework is fill in the sheets from last week. Update this so that I don't always appear. Okay. And the number? Okay, great. Okay. So does everyone still have this sheet from last week that we were working on? This is it's called the Field Planting Plan and Record. We're going to fill this out. Ooh. Mood lighting. Okay, so watermelon. We're going to transplant it. We ended up with between 2.5 and 3 beds. So since watermelon is delicious, I would say 3 beds. And there's definitely truth, like you were getting at this, that like you need them all to be ripe at the same time. So it's worth it to plant a little extra, because if you need 200 watermelons that are ripe all at the same time, you might get 300 watermelons over the course of the season, but only 150 of them are all ever ripe together. So 3 beds. Who can find how many rows per bed on the green sheet? 1? 1 row per bed. And we're going to go with 18 inches. Okay. So that's the homework. Thank you, everyone. Yes? I'm sorry?
Bed feet. Is that how many beds?
Oh, we changed it, last week. We changed it to number of beds instead of bed feet.
How many beds would it be?
For the watermelon, we have 3 beds. Yeah. Okay. It is not. We will be transplanting this watermelon, which is actually a great question. So the next thing that we want to talk about is the difference between direct seeding and transplanting. Can anyone explain that? Or do you have an idea of what that might be?
Transplanting, you start in the greenhouse earlier,
Yep.
so that you can get them in the ground and crop earlier. Because in March, in Florida or California, you can stick it in the ground and plant it. But March here, we still have snow on the ground, so if we can get it started at the same time, we can get it harvested earlier.
Yeah, so transplanting means you start it in the greenhouse. You're planting an actual plant rather than direct seeding, which is when you're putting the seed in the ground. And there's a couple reasons that you might choose to do one or the other. So, like Jeremy mentioned, one advantage to transplanting in Minnesota is that you can get your plants started earlier. We recovered the greenhouse in February so that we could start it up in March. So we won't be able to plant anything outside at least until the middle of April, but we'll have plants that have been started in March, so they'll be older. Another reason does anyone know another reason why you might transplant something? Yeah.
That's.
Yeah. Tell me more.
House, then, house and plants growing, you can put those ones in the ground. But if they don't grow, then, you need knowledge of the seed.
Yeah.
From outside, then you might not know why they didn't grow. Did something eat them, or,
Yeah. Yeah, so sometimes you get seed that's kind of cruddy. You might have old seed. You also might have, some plants are really hard to get to germinate, which is what you say when the seed is sprouting. So they take a lot of care. They take a lot of care and attention and wonderful, comfortable conditions. So if you have bad seed or old seed, you want to know what's growing already before you plant it outside. You don't want to waste the space by planting it and having it not come up. And similarly, for plants that are harder to get to germinate, you want to germinate them in the best conditions. So it's nicer to germinate a seed in a 75-degree greenhouse with high humidity than it is to throw it into the ground that might be 50 degrees and really cold and wet and try to get it to grow there. It's also warmer in a greenhouse, so things grow faster. So there's a lot of reasons why you might transplant. What about a reason why you might direct seed?
It's hard to transplant carrots.
Yeah, some things are really hard to transplant. They're really fragile, especially root crops. They start growing out along root, and if you jostle it, it gets angry and doesn't like that. Did you have another reason? Yeah, so another reason is that it's a lot faster to throw a seed into a ground than it is to start it in the greenhouse and water it 3 times a day and buy flats and potting soil. It's cheaper and it's faster to put seed into the ground. So if your plant's going to do okay, if you just put the seed into the ground, sometimes that can be the right choice.
But this also comes to, some seeds they can handle the cold more, but it's better to direct seed them.
Yes.
Like peas and spinach and those guys, they can handle the cold.
Yeah.
They're a little better.
And in addition to handling the cold, they love the cold. Yeah, so they want the cold. There's a couple things that want the cold. So on this green sheet, the new green sheet, they replaced the pink sheet, we have crops broken up into transplanting. That's on the first page, front and back. And then the second page is direct seeding. And the reason is that we gave you a green sheet instead of the pink or white sheet is mostly that we wanted to add more information, not that the information on the pink sheet was totally incorrect. So never fear. So under the transplanted crops, we have some crops that that get in the ground really soon, so they want the start in the greenhouse. Those are things like Brussels sprouts and cabbage and broccoli and kale. And there's other crops that are really particular, and they need the perfect, beautiful, hotel-like conditions of the greenhouse in order to grow. And those are crops like eggplant and tomatoes and peppers. But you'll also notice that some crops show up both on the direct seeded sheet and on the transplant sheet. Can anyone find corn? Yeah. Do you always direct seed it or do you always transplant it?
No, I was joking.
Yeah. One of the farmers, Porfirio Perez at BRF, has had great success transplanting his corn. He starts it in the greenhouse 10 days before it's ready to go, and he thinks it's because the birds don't eat the seed that he plants in the ground. And so covers it up, plants it in the greenhouse, and then transplants it outside. So corn is one of those crops. Most commonly direct seeded, though. Who else can find another crop that's on both sheets? Cucumbers. Who here transplants their cucumbers? Who here direct seeds their cucumbers? Who here has never planted cucumbers? You get a choice. So we'll be using this sheet a fair amount tonight, and I just want to walk through what's on it. So it's the crops, either direct seeded or transplant. The next column is the first day that you can plant it outside. This obviously changes based on the weather, but it's a general guideline. It also doesn't mean that you have to plant it on that day or that you can't plant it later. The next column is how many days it likes to spend in the greenhouse for transplanted crops. This was kind of difficult information to track down, but it's a pretty good guideline of if your broccoli spends 30 days in the greenhouse, you'll have good broccoli, and that'll be ready to transplant outside. The next column is days to maturity from transplant. So what that means is how many days it takes once you take the plant that you grow in the greenhouse and planted it in the ground, how many days until you get what you want to harvest. And oftentimes that's a pretty big range. Yeah?
When I met Laura, there's a question we need to ask. If you have hot pepper, like those peppers, if you start them early, in January, February, and you transplant them, do you shorten the maturity date? Because she said she was going to ask me, I don't know what she asked. How do you transplant in hot pepper? Because the one that are like 105 days to maturity, so that you can get it. Do you have any trick to,
My experience with really hot peppers is that the hotter the pepper, the slower the plant grows. And so it will need the 105 days from transplant to maturity. But if you get a healthier transplant, like if you, on this sheet it says peppers, page 2, 30 days in the greenhouse. If you have a really hot pepper, my experience is that you might need 40 or 50 days in the greenhouse before you have a healthy transplant. I don't think you shorten the number of days.
you does not?
I don't think you do. Sorry. I wish. Okay, so days to maturity is oftentimes a very big range. And that's something that you can find in your seed catalog when you're looking at your varieties. So peppers, I just happened to open peppers. So let's see. So each variety should have a number of days to maturity. And I'm in the Johnny's catalog, not everyone has the Johnny's catalog, but I'm looking at hot peppers, and it'll say things like, for this golden ghost pepper, 94 days to yellow ripeness from transplant. So that gives you a really specific number. That doesn't guarantee that it's going to be ripe in 94 days, but it's like a pretty good guess, because you can have weather conditions that affect it. So you always want to, save that. The seed catalog is your best source of information about days to maturity for a variety, and the information on this sheet is to give you a good guess.
So like the green or the seed catalog gives you that specific date, but if you go ahead and start from the greenhouse, track those days. Is that what you were saying?
No.
To give to equal the maturity date.
Yeah. So the maturity date, each crop will tell you, a good seed catalog will tell you whether their days to maturity are from transplant or from seeding. And that information is usually under like the crop heading. So this says, okay, so under the peppers, it's under this like general information, it says days to maturity, approximate days from transplanting outdoors to first picking. Things like carrots, under days to maturity, it will say approximate days from direct seeding. So they will tell you what the days are meaning.
So there's kind of a set guide, kind of each individual plant that should only be in the greenhouse X amount of days? Or do you need to determine, or is this just something everybody knows after doing it for a while?
The plants, need to be in the greenhouse for a certain number of days to be strong enough to survive outside. And then after that point, they start becoming less healthy. And the days on finding the number of days that a plant needs to stay in the greenhouse was something that I drew on my past farming records for in order to come up with the numbers that are on this sheet. Seed catalogs will often say, start 4 to 6 weeks before planting. But I wanted you to have something a little bit more specific. But it's also if you keep them, sometimes you can't help keeping plants in the greenhouse longer. And they're just a little less healthy, and you deal with it. Or sometimes maybe the weather is bad, and it's cold, and you have to wait a week to put them out. Does that answer the question? Okay. Yeah.
I have a question about the transplant shock.
Yes.
Do they go into shock if you keep them in the greenhouse longer or shorter?
Oh. So Zoe's asking about transplant shock, can you describe what you mean by that?
I guess, you grow it in the greenhouse and then you plant it in the ground, maybe it won't do that well right away because it was suddenly disturbed and put in place.
Yeah.
Is that a good description?
Yeah, that's a good description. So what she's talking about is when you take a plant directly from the greenhouse and plant it into the ground, it's unhappy because it used to have this nice layer of plastic over it, and it was a fairly stable temperature, so it might wilt, it might turn light green, it might die. The ways to avoid that are to harden off your plants, which is to gradually put them outside for a couple days before you put them in the ground. I think that the younger the plant, the more sensitive it is to the shock of being outside. But the best way to do it is to let it sit outside for a couple days before.
So when you bring them outside for hardening, do you put a small crop cover over them in the night, or?
No. I just roll them outside on a wagon and let them be. I figure that's a big enough shock to let them recover from going outside before you yank them out of their cell, which is disturbing their roots, which is another big shock. So the multi-levels of shocks that they undergo are being outside and then having their roots all messed up. So do one at a time.
That should be after the first frost. Otherwise, to do it before the frost even dies.
Yeah, and you want to make sure it's not going to freeze while they're outside. That's another thing. Okay, back to the green sheet. Yeah, well, after the last frost. Watch your weather. And then the rest of this sheet talks about the different size flats we should use when we plant in the greenhouse and how many seeds per cell. And then the last two columns are columns we used last week, which was the spacing between plants and how many rows per bed. Yeah. Do you want to just do an explanation of flats right now? Yeah.
What do you mean by report to flat size? What is that?
Okay, we're gonna have the flat to show you guys. It be between flat, open flat, flat, and onion flat. So I'm gonna show you, but most we do is onion flat. We call open flat, and I'm gonna show you. And the one is for is different size. This is 128. That's how they are small like this, and you can plant brassica, but not a broccoli, but just Napa Cabbage is good for. Broccoli gonna go to 72. That is the size, and because they stay longer, and we watch for the weather. if weather really bad, then we don't want to plant it, and so we can hardy that, and the root is get tidy, and so that's why we put into a 72 broccoli. And like Napa Cabbage, the root is kind of go around on top, now go down a lot, and so that's why we put in here. But depend how soon you're gonna transplant. And talk about hardy is Molly already tell that, and so that's supposed to be go outside like 3 to 4 days. It's a good sign to transplant. And this is how we call open flat. Open flat, that means
10 by 20 inch.
we just fill out the soil for just about inch, leave 1 inch like this, and so we just use the a stick, we level up, we just do line, we just sprinkle seed on it. I'm gonna have that on the farm too, but now I'm gonna show you the flat. And this is we can plant onion in an open flat or 288 cell. But this one, when they're coming out, they're not really, if longer, weak, then we keep watering and wash the nutrient, and onion gonna turn yellow and they're gonna suffer in here. But easy to transplant on the field, but good in another way. But open flat is good. They really healthy, but you need to separate. But we do both this one.
What were you saying about the 3 to 4 days for broccoli?
What?
What were you saying about the 3 to 4 days for broccoli?
To hardy, take inside the greenhouse to outside. So they're hardy, and when you transplant it, it's not sharp or lock. Do I answer your question? Yeah, I think, and this is 50. 50 have to be go like squash, cucumber, watermelons, tomato, if you want to. If you think that you're not going to plant sooner, then 50 is good to start it. We do 50 is something to most. We don't do much about the 128. We did not plant those. And this is if you have, we have this one, not just this one, okay? We're going to put in this one too. And go like this. So hold tighter, and it's help them when it's not bending. Sometimes you figure out. That's why we use this flat.
At MFA, we require that you put all of your flats in the wet flat because it's really easy to drop them if they're not in it. They're not very sturdy, and we don't want to drop any of these flats. And it's also really like it's hard to slide them across the tables. So we want you to kind of come on with a flat.
Are those universal for a different brand? The 50s would be the same size cell?
Kind of. You want to look for what you're getting, like in the 50s. I've noticed it the most, where like some companies do circles, and the circles are like not that much bigger than a 72.
Square better.
And this one, like, it's a square, so it's taking up almost as much room as it possibly can. The more soil it has, the more nutrients the plants will have. Nate, can you talk about like the potting up and like with the tomatoes and peppers? Let's get started in class.
Yeah. The tomato and pepper, you need to put into an open flat because when you put into the open flat, you put it in there, and so glue it here. Oh, yeah. I don't show. The open flat, you need to do fill out the soil, but we don't do much. Really, not much soil, about half, because week or two we already be potting, and so just enough to germinate. And so we put line that when we fill out the soil and we make a line and we sprinkle seed in there, and so when they coming out, it's easy to pick it out. And so we're gonna be potting into the 50 only.
Here's
Because when you direct seed into the 50 and you wait until it germinate, then you're gonna wait, then you already wash it, you water and wash, and underneath here you see the hole, and it's dripping over here and wash all the nutrients, and so the plant gonna be softer. That's why we do repotting. And the stage about this side, pepper and tomato.
So you plant,
This is the open flat.
open flat?
This one they be potting beef, but we don't do beef, but they really good, and they do these couple really good. They do really fast, and so they do
And you
transplant.
transplant it?
Yeah, repotting. They repotting and they transplant on the field, but they repotting into I believe it's 92 cell, and so tomato, pepper, about this stage, you repotting into a 50. If you direct seed into the 50, cucumber, pumpkin, zucchini, watermelon, you can just seed it in right into it because they germinate really quickly. 3 days, they already come out. Because we put in the germinating chamber, and so put in there, and we close it, and we have water underneath, and we turn on the water, it's hot, like 80 degrees, and moisture coming out, and really nice and hot in there, and they germinate really well. And that's why we do this one for squash. We're gonna do that on the 3rd. We're gonna show you that on the 3rd. Don't miss that. If you miss that day, you're gonna be, oh, what am I gonna do?
Did you say you use hot water or water?
Huh?
Did you say you use hot water or?
No, we set that into the shell, but we have water underneath, and water we turn on the thermos, and they boil, but they're not really super hot. They just enough to warm enough to moist. We don't need to water.
That's for the,
For every single vegetable that we're gonna try repotting, or onion, or tomato, spinach, anything you want to plant in the greenhouse, go into the germinating chamber.
It's called the germination chamber. It's like a sealed box that is heated by steam. Here's another picture of me. Can you explain what
All right, this
we created it?
yeah, this is how we how. Do you see me? You know, you see me. That's how we are repotting into a 50. Yeah. Yeah, 50. That we repotting pepper or no tomato. We have to do in that stage only. And so if tomato, that stage you don't repotting, you wait on next 2 days, they're gonna be nice and tall. And so it's gonna be hot for you repotting. And that's why we recommend every farmer will come almost every day when you put, when I say 3 days they germinate, then you need to come the day 3. And day 4 and day 5 we have to repot. Certain crop, not all of them.
is it the stage? What stage is it? Is it the cut? It is before they have the leaves.
Yeah. If they have well feed, then they have too much roof, and you gonna they're gonna be shocked. They're not happy. They're well. They're tired. Took longer to
So when they're at this early stage, they're easy to pull up and easy to transplant and they don't get shocked. The shock doesn't.
Yeah, you're not cutting the big root, like a big root, but I don't know how to call it.
Yeah.
Did you say you repot tomatoes every?
After 5 days,
Yeah, when they sprout it, and we put in there only 2 to 3 nights. We don't want them to come out. I will tell you more that in the third, okay? But now I just show you how to prepare. Now we're gonna say a greenhouse plant. Tonight is a greenhouse plant, and you need to prepare for. You have tomato. You need 50. You need broccoli. This is 72. Broccoli is 72. Pepper and tomato 50. And you need to prepare to buy for your greenhouse. Now we prepare for greenhouse, and you need to have this one to hold the flat, the cell flat. And so when we put into the germination chamber, we're gonna put in there, and so when we put in there, we pull out because some we have like flat, but we need air go in every single one. And when we pull out, they're gonna tip, and it's the soil jumping, and so you see it's not staying the same, and they're gonna be when they germinate, the root gonna go up, or some gonna missing. That's why we require to have this one now. If you want to, I believe we have on the farm, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just let you know that we have this one on the farm, but you're gonna pay for the
how
thing.
much per tree?
I think almost $2 for each. This one, but this one I'm not sure.
Great question.
So it's my understanding that we are responsible to make those ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we get a list of what all we need?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a.
We're gonna make it tonight too.
Yeah, we're gonna have that.
Perfect. You have one? Okay. Here you go, Shay. But Carol, you only we only repot things once. It's not like every 5 days or something. It's just one time.
Tonight we just show what you're gonna prepare for your greenhouse. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And so
in this,
just let you know that we have this one, and so don't surprise them. Wow, we don't know. Okay, that's why we are like a warning or something. It's not warning, but yeah. So you're not scared. And we have these in the farm, and you can purchase over there. And Laura organized really good over there for supply in the greenhouse.
so if you look on page 22, has seeding trays. So it has a couple different kinds. Does anyone not see seeding trays? Okay, good. So they have these things called pro trays, which are cheap, but they're pretty shoddy. They're like this one with the circles. I always recommend, if you can afford it, to get the plug trays. They're squares. And so what it says, the way you read this is plug squares. This is the third line. And so the numbers say how many holes there are. So this one has 50, or you can get 72, or 98, or 128, or 162. And you can either buy them by the case or individually. So if you buy by the case, you have to buy 100, but it's a lot cheaper. Or you can buy individually, and they're $1.50 each. Let's see what else you would need to know. So I would put a star by these, by plug tray, so by the third row. And then by the row that says 10-20 flats. A 10-20 is the way that they talk about an open flat. So,
with 10, 20, 18 flats?
With the open like this.
I would do the 10-20 flats with holes. And you can either get them with holes or without holes, and you want them with holes because the water can go through. Otherwise, you'll just get soup.
How long do they last?
How long do they last? If you're careful with them, they can last a couple of years. And then when they start breaking down, I like double them up. And then when they really start breaking down, I triple them up. And so then you just are kind of like putting flat on flat on flat, but they become a little sturdier.
What about the bottom one?
The web flat, that is under web flats.
And do you have to like be part of the business to buy from here?
No, you can just walk in and buy stuff. They're in Woodbury.
Yeah, you have to be careful because I missed it many times.
What's it called?
Jordan seeds.
Jordan State.
I was going to point out a couple other things about
Please do.
seeds. One thing is that if you want to farm as a certified organic farmer, you can't get seeds from Jordan's because their seeds are not organic approved. And so we will help you figure out where else you can get seeds in the seed order class, which is next Monday. A lot of their seeds are like fine, but they're not certified organic, and they're very common seeds, so they're not able to be grown and certified organic. So that's one thing to note. Another thing is that you can also find tags at Jordan's. So like the little, like that blue thing in the picture where you write the date and the variety. You can buy a roll of those. And for the people that are farming at Big River Farms, come let me know after this class if you're going to buy a roll, what color you want. If you're going to be growing in the greenhouse, so that's just Kapu and Kwaku tonight. And the first year farmers will supply, for the shared plot will supply that tags. But we try to have everyone have a different color because then it's easier to organize in the greenhouse. So let me know if there's a color that you prefer if you're going to get those tags. And May would also like everyone to bring a Sharpie.
Yeah.
So to write on your tags, Sharpies are a hot commodity in the greenhouse. So even first year farmers, it's a good idea to bring. I'll let you finish, May, but.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, just everybody bring, like, it's best to get, I think it's a waterproof Sharpie or this.
Yeah, you're gonna, tonight we're gonna do like a greenhouse plan and that you don't worry too much, but I'm gonna tell you that you need to prepare for it, and so you need to have your marker and your tag, or if you don't have the tag, like this one, and you think that you're not gonna use this flat for many times writing in there, that's fine, but you have to have permanent marker. And so you can write in here, you're gonna, when you plan it, you're gonna put the date and variety you have, and you write in there, the day you're seeding. And that's why the permanent marker is good for this flat too. They black, but you can still see it.
So like here, this is an example of the tag. So it has the day that I seeded it and then what it is, which is time.
This is one kind of tag too. I use this one. And Laura said you have the colorful because you remember which flat is yours.
My guess is you can probably find those on a smaller scale, like Menards and Home Depot.
Jordan?
Probably.
But I think Menards pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Because they Jordan is a little bit cheaper, not cheap, but a little
I'm just thinking of like, I just got my backyard garden, I don't think I need.
Also, I mean, you can, if you're just doing your backyard garden, you can do whatever you want. Like masking tape, whatever. Yeah.
So now I understand you put it on the tag and then also write on the flat.
No, the other option is you can write on the flat. But it's not very helpful because we like to be able to go into the greenhouse and like group everyone's flats together. And so like if all of the blue ones are together and all of the pink ones are together, and it can get kind of confusing if someone's just writing in Sharpie on the flat.
Will you tell us how many trays will we need?
Yes. Well, we'll figure it out together. We won't tell you. But you're in the shared plot, right? We'll provide all of that. All of the supplies for the shared plot is provided by MFA. I think we're good. Okay.
Yeah, and the thing that remember to have your calendar with you. And so anytime you don't need to write into a piece of paper, and so after day and next day you put a new one. That is really good for record keeping if you have a calendar. And so the day you're planning and you put in that day, that month. And so next year, then you want to do, well, this year I do this variety. In this day, you go back to look in there. That is a record. And so you say, okay, this year I plant too early. Then I need to move to like 2 or 3 days. Or you say, oh, I plant this too late. I need to move forward too early. And you have the calendar. You don't need to go look for, searching for. And remember, marker is really important. By the time you get to the field, sometimes disappear all of us. And we can't find no more. But pencil is good to write in there. It's not washable when you water, but not as good as permanent marker. And you have the calendar is good. And
I think maybe do folks have a greenhouse plan sheet of paper?
Yep, in your binder, there is a greenhouse plan under farm plan. And I think it's the second sheet right after the sleep order. And once someone finds it, you can hold it up. So,
Hey,
everybody have a seesaw in the sheet with you. I think everyone has some. So you need to have this one. Work for you.
Under farm plans.
it should look like this.
Look like this. If you have one in your plan, I have one. So it's to the they call farm plan. Look into a farm plan. Look like this.
So you want to have 2 sheets out. You want to have the greenhouse plan and the field planting plan that we've been working on. So have both of those in front of you.
Yeah, the field look like this. Yeah.
Okay, who needs more time to get those sheets out?
Molly, what do you mean by variety?
By variety on here? That would be like the name of the plant that you're going to grow. So like for Napa Cabbage, it might be Bilko or Rubicon.
But there's just a coffee, there's a name, but there's different kind of water.
Yeah, right. The first sheet we're going to start with is this field planting plan. Wait, they might be buried up here. Yes. So this sheet should be filled out, if you have it from last week, it should be filled out to this level. So we have all of the, just for a refresher, we had this contract, which is what the first year farmers are going to grow in the shared plot, and we were working to create our field plan from this contract. So the information that we're going to fill out this week is we want to get our greenhouse plan, and we want to come up with our planting dates for the field. So we're trying to fill out more columns on this sheet. We're trying to fill out the goal planting date. So how do you think we'll figure out what day we want to plant our crops? Yeah. Yes, we have to go backwards from the harvest date. So I'll pull this up and you all don't need to find it. But this is our contract. And if you remember, we had grouped the first 3 harvests. We have 5 harvests of Napa Cabbage. 3 of them are close together, and then we skip a couple months and we get 2 more harvests. So the first 3 we're going to plan together as one group. So we're going to plan for the first harvest date that we needed as our harvest date. So 6/19. And this is where you're going to need your calendars. You just need all the paper. I apologize, there's so much paper. So we want to harvest our cabbage on June 19th. And then what do we do with our harvest date?
Get your maturity date.
Yes, we have to find out how many days to maturity. So on this green sheet, how many days to maturity for Napa Cabbage? 60. So if we want to harvest Napa Cabbage on 6/19, we have to plant it 60 days before that.
2 months before.
Yep. So you can use your calendar to find June 19th, which is a Tuesday, and count backwards 60 days. Yeah.
April 20th.
Yes, April 20th. So we want to plant, so this is harvest. Days to maturity. And then plant.
We can see your writing.
You cannot see my writing?
Yeah.
Is that better?
There you go.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense that you couldn't see that. Oh wait, but now you can't see this.
That's the season date?
Well, we have, I think we have. Okay.
Okay.
No. This is what we're looking at. We see on the cabbage.
Yeah, what we're looking at is this first planting of cabbage.
Okay.
And bear with me as I move these things around.
What?
We wanted to harvest on 6/19 because we're grouping these 3 plantings together. And then we used our green sheet to figure out that it takes 60 days to get from planting to harvest. So we count 60 days back from when we want to harvest. And that means April 19th, 20th, April 20th.
Because May has to take.
Okay. So that means that our goal planting date for this first planting of cabbage is April 20th. Any have questions about that? Yes? Yes, so this is when we are putting the plant in the field.
Molly, what was the middle part? 60 days?
So 60 days, we looked on this green sheet, and it says under Napa Cabbage that it's 60 days to maturity from transplanting.
So maturity means ready to harvest?
Yes, yes.
We did not count the day that we seeding in the greenhouse. We count the day that we is it transplant on the ground. Oh, yeah.
So we will get to the greenhouse seeding date once we fill out this sheet, okay? So who can walk me through or walk us all through how we will find the goal planting date for our second planting of Napa Cabbage? Can someone who has not contributed quite so much perhaps help us out here? Yusuf, can you do it? No, you can't. Okay.
So,
Okay, great.
so the harvest date June 26th.
So, so we are harvesting these three together.
Oh, okay.
We're planting those three together, and then our second planting.
Second planting.
No, September 5th.
Yep. So September 5th. Okay.
And then we'll go back 60 days from that.
Yep.
It'll be like 7 to 8.
I'm sorry?
July 7th? Yeah, 7 to 8.
Okay, July 7th.
I just counted weeks, but.
Great. So that means we're going to try to plant on July 7th. So, goal planting date. There we go. The next one is not a really good example. Potatoes. May, can you, well.
Okay. Oh, potatoes. It's up and down.
Down.
Yeah, potato, as soon as the ground is ready, then we plant it. We direct seed on the ground. Whenever the tractor be able to go to the ground, but we're gonna harvest on August. Yeah, we know that we're gonna get potato on August, but gonna be called baby young potato, and so we don't know how we're gonna get earlier, and so we just whenever the ground's ready, then we can just plant it, and so potato you plant it, you can harvest when young potato or leave it they mature enough on the ground. The top, the green is die, you still digging good potato. You can sell all year long, like until December or January. And so I have no idea what that potato.
Yeah, so if you look in your seed catalog under potatoes, it doesn't tell you how many days to maturity. It's just like not very helpful. So the traditional wisdom is that you plant potatoes as soon as you can in the spring. This year at the farm, we have a big problem with potato beetles. And what I would like to try this year at the farm for potatoes is to plant them the first week of June, which you might think is crazy.
Sure.
Because what I've heard is that the potato beetles come like flying over. If you planted them later, if you wait to plant your potatoes, they're not up, and when the potato beetles come like flying over the countryside, and so they don't have anything to eat, and so they'll skip your farm. That's what I've heard. So I think it's worth trying. Okay, so potato beetles, they find your potatoes because they kind of like come in as like a swarm. And the time of year that they fly over is like maybe the beginning of June. And so if you plant your potatoes in April, you've got this nice looking potato plant that's above ground. And so they fly over and they see and smell your plant and they start eating it to death. However, I think it was our organic inspector that told us this, if you wait to plant your potatoes until June, the potato beetles fly over and there's nothing above ground. And so they can't smell your potatoes, they can't see them, they don't eat them. And they go to someone else's farm. So
You know what they did?
what do they do?
My tomatoes.
They eat your tomatoes.
Yeah.
So they'll go to your tomatoes.
There was no potato, so they would be eating,
Yes. Yes, wait.
Do they, like, once they plant on the plant, do they not migrate again?
What?
Once they like, land on the plant, do they not fly away to migrate again?
They just stay there because they love it so much.
If we plant earlier, when they eat it, you see the mother crawling, they eat it, they lay egg underneath the leaf, that if you not pick it up when you see the egg, then they hatch, then they keep eating, they eat the stalk too. They eat the leaf and stalk and go down to the potato, they eat potato too. They are really, really good eaters. And so,
I know something about that, they sleep under where your potatoes are. Yeah,
Oh, they go underground to sleep?
yeah.
I didn't know that. That's distressing.
Because you can dig it and they're still around the yellow.
yellow lava.
Gross.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an unhelpful example, but I'm just saying June 1st for the potatoes, and it will be part of the Great Farming Experiment. Turnips, our next crop. Who can walk us through? Lisa, can you get us to our goal planting date for our first planting of turnips? So just so we remember, our first harvest date is June 19th.
So we're skipping potatoes.
We're skipping potatoes. We're just,
Okay.
yep. Okay. May 14th, perfect. So how did you do that? Yep, so you counted back 35 days from June 19th. So we can fill in for turnips 1. Okay. What about turnips 2? Amy, can you do that for us? So the second planting of turnips is going to be harvested on 9/19. No, you're totally fine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What date?
August
11?
August 14.
You have August 14th? I think that you maybe got an extra day or two in there. So I think it's actually the 14th. And I'm guessing that also because this was the 14th. So in the second week of August, we want to plant those turnips. Thank you. Okay. And then, any volunteers for watermelon? You can do it. Okay. So what day do we want to harvest?
What time? Depend on the time.
It's true.
What type of watermelon is it?
Oh boy.
It's only 1 year.
These are going to be transplanted watermelons. We're transplanting them.
Alright, okay.
Ooh.
Good question. I just went to the seat. Alright, so we have days to maturity from transplant is 75 days to 95 days.
Okay, so this is kind of hard because we have a big range.
Yeah.
So what I do when I have a range is I go someplace in the middle.
Okay.
So like 85 days. Let's say 85 days. Okay? Okay.
Keep it, you 9 days.
90 days is easier. But then I guess you could move 5 days ahead.
Yeah. Does that include the greenhouse too, right?
Usually in Minnesota, every year we hit from May 28 or 26. And so we deal with the regular transplant in June.
February?
Yeah.
85 days from August.
From August, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you're.
Okay,
So it's about 3 months.
yeah. So June 1st, or May 30, 20.
So it would be closer, so it would be 85 days before
So you got July, June,
July, June.
May,
So July is 31, June is 30,
60 days, 61 days.
and then 15 days in August,
We're gonna harvest in
Oh,
August.
yeah.
76. So you have to go back another like 10 days,
So May.
May like 20th or so. Does that make sense? Okay. That was very sloppily written.
You know how many days in the greenhouse? Watermelon? What did they say?
How long does it take?
19 days in the greenhouse.
Don't rush, okay?
18 days?
Don't rush. Like cucumber, watermelon, nuts, what else?
It says 19 days.
Squash. Don't rush.
Greenhouse days in
19. They grow so fast. So what we have, we pretty much have our field planting plan figured out for the first year farmers. So we know what we're planting, we know how much of it. So I guess if I point at the computer, you can't see it. So we know when we're planting, we know what we're planting, and we know how much we're planting. So we have the date, the crop, and the number of beds. So now what we need to do is figure out when we're starting these plants in the greenhouse. So are we going to start all of these in the greenhouse? Yes or no? Who thinks we're going to start all of these plants in the greenhouse? Who thinks we're gonna only start some of them? Yeah, which ones, Fenley?
Cabbage,
Yep.
Napa, and then the watermelon.
Yes.
That's it.
Yep, we're only gonna start the Napa cabbage and the watermelon because they're transplanted crops. So, let's go to our greenhouse plan, which is right here. So the first thing we're going to do is fill out what we know. So we know the crop. So we have, is there a way I can split this? Oopsies. This is going to be complicated. Okay. So we know the crop. Maybe someone can read things to me. So we have Napa cabbage. And how many beds of Napa cabbage do we need for the first Napa cabbage planting?
What was the question?
How many beds of Napa cabbage do we need for the first planting? 2. Okay. And how many plants is that? We should have recorded that somewhere. So this, let's go back. I have our records from last week.
I have here. Oh, you already have it.
That's a good record keeping.
Haha, yes. Normally it's not quite so big. Okay. Is this sparking anyone's memory of the... So we have 2 beds, and the circle tells me that we're going to have 480 plants. So on our greenhouse plan, we're going to write 480. That's the number of plants we need. Then we're going to move on. What we're doing now is just filling out what we know already. So we have our second planting of Napa cabbage. And how many beds is that?
1.5.
1.5. Whoopsies. Okay. And how many plants is that? The 240 doesn't seem quite right to me. We can figure it out though. So we have 1.5 beds. And our field planting plan and record says that there are 2 rows per bed and 15 inches between plants. So that means how many plants are in each bed? Can anyone remember how to do that from last week? So you have your field, or you have your bed, and it's 150 feet long. So how many inches is that? How many?
I think it's 100.
1,800 inches. So 1,800 inches. And if there's 1,800 inches and 15 inches between each plant, how many plants can fit?
200.
Yeah. It's 120? Okay. So 120 plants in a row. And there's 2 rows. Yeah, that's why we circled that. So there's 240 plants in a bed. So in 1.5 beds, there's 360. I do? Where?
On the left.
Oh. Awesome. Were you staring at that the whole time? That's a bummer. Okay. 360. And so now we've written down everything we know about the second planting of Napa, and then watermelon. Whoops. 3 beds of watermelon. See if we were good about 100 watermelon per bed, so it's 300 plants. Okay. So we have what we know in our greenhouse plan so far. So now what we need to figure out are the seeding dates, the tray size, and the number of trays. So first let's go through and fill out the tray size. Can anyone find the tray size for Napa Cabbage? Or who can? I know almost all of you can. Yeah, so 72. So we're going to fill that in for both of them. What about for watermelon? Waku, can you find it? 50. Okay. Perfect. What do we need to know in order to find out how many trays? Or how do we find out how many trays we need to plant? Yep, so you take the number of plants needed divided by the tray size. So that for this case, for the first planting of Napa Cabbage, it would be 480. Is that the number you got? 6.666. Okay. So it makes the most sense to plant like real numbers of trays. So I would just round this up to 7. Is that what you would do?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not sure how many are going to die, how many are going to survive. And we need to add one more tray up.
Would you do 8 trays?
I like to do 8 because sometimes each bed, like, you count it almost like 6 or 10 dies.
Okay.
More is better than less.
So May would actually do 8 trays. 7 trays was close to the exact math, but we're going to account for the fact that some of them are going to die, or they're not going to do well.
It's going to sound like wasted, but a little bit help. Because when you lay it, you lay all of it.
It will help you in the long run.
Yep. When we make a decision like this to plant an extra flat, I always consider it's the cheapest investment in order to make sure you have enough. Like, it's really cheap to take care of one extra flat of plants. And so if you want to make sure you have enough, just go ahead and plant that extra flat. It's way easier to plant the extra flat and throw it away than it is to not meet your contract.
So it's safer to do it than be sorry later, right?
Yes, within reason. Like, I wouldn't plant 10 flats to make sure I got the right number of cabbages, but I would plant 8. So, similarly, in order to get the number of flats needed for the second planting, we would do the number of plants divided by the tray size. It's exactly 5. So, yeah, make it 6. Okay. What about for watermelon?
6
Yeah. So dividing 300 by 50 is exactly 6, but we'll do 7 just to make sure. Okay? So then when you go to Jordan's to buy your trays, you could take your greenhouse plan with you, and you would know that you need 14 72s and 7 50s. And you need a webbed flat for each of those. So that would be, you need 21 webbed flats to go underneath. Is everyone with me on that? Okay. The last step of this plan is to come up with the seeding date. Who has an idea? How are we going to do that?
The goal planting date minus the greenhouse. That should be.
Yeah. So can you do that for Napa Cabbage?
30 days of Cabbage, so I would say probably March 20th for the first one.
Yeah. Where did you get that information?
So Napa Cabbage takes about 30 days from the greenhouse. So you minus 30 days from April 20th, so it would be March 20th.
Yeah. So then what does that tell us about our second planting of cabbage? Well, quick, never mind. I got ahead of ourselves. We should record that. Okay, so that means that our seeding date is March 20th. Goal. What about for our second planting of Napa Cabbage?
Should be 30 days from it, so I would say June.
Yep. 30 days before our goal field planting date. Okay. And what about watermelon? What is our goal planting date for watermelon? Yeah, so when do we want to plant it on May 20th? Yep, May 1st. Where's watermelon? Here's watermelon. So we want to plant it 19 days beforehand, so it would be May 1st. And there you have your greenhouse plan. So now you know, this is like your record of what to do when you go to the greenhouse, and you can take it with you.
Days in the plan.
Yes.
Does that include the days it's germinated? Because when you put it in the flat, germinate, it will take 19 days.
Yes, it includes the days for germination. So if you look, so things that germinate, May was saying that like watermelons and cucumbers germinate really quickly. And so their days in the greenhouse are really short. They're like 19, 17 days.
They will be strong enough to transplant.
Mm-hmm. Things like celery and parsley take a really long time to germinate. So if you look on this sheet, they take 56 days in the greenhouse. And a lot of that is because it can take 20 days for the seed to germinate.
Onions also.
Onions also take a really long time. They grow super slow.
Sometimes you think it's not good, but it's still.
All you have to do is wait. Okay. So I want to do one more example, and that is an example of what to do when you need to repot a plant. So what is a plant that we might need to repot? Tomatoes. Okay. How many tomatoes do you want to grow, Rahu? Okay, great.
Just example.
Mm-hmm.
200 plants.
You want 200 tomato plants. Okay. You want 200 plants. So, let's skip the beds for now, and we'll focus on how to record this in your greenhouse sheet, because you have to seed it in an open flat initially and then repot it. So, you need 200 plants, and what are you first going to plant them into? What size flat are you going to first plant it into? Yeah. You're gonna first plant it in an open flat. I don't know if we wrote it on a sheet, but you can comfortably fit about 300 plants, 300 seeds in an open flat. So how many open flats would you plant?
300 go into this one.
I think just one.
Yeah, you just plant one. Okay, so then what we're gonna do is we're going to use the next line. So this is your initial planting, this line. The next line is going to be for that same crop, but when you pot it up. Because you're performing another action in the greenhouse. So every time you perform a greenhouse action, you want to have a line on this sheet to record what you're doing. So your tomatoes get big enough to transplant, to repot. What size are you going to plant them into? What size flat?
So 50,
Yeah, you'll plant it into a 50. And you need 200 plants, so how many 50s are you going to plant for? 4.
I would do fine.
Okay, so you would do 5. Okay. And so that's how you would record it. So you want one line per thing you're going to be doing in the greenhouse.
I got a question.
Yeah?
What about these older ones we had?
Good question. May, can you explain what the gray part is for?
That one is, actually, that one is, when, when you are, you repotting, and also the day that you planting, and the, when you starting. You know that you starting over here, but in the beginning, but later you're gonna change your mind, or you're gonna do repotting, and that actually is how much you need. Yeah.
So say you you were going to originally plant on your first round of Napa Cabbage on March 20th, but then you got sick. You want to record, so you couldn't go to the greenhouse on March 20th. This is to record when you actually did it. So you got better 2 days later, you did it on March 22nd. Or say you ran out of trays, and you only had 7 trays, you would record what you actually did. So the gray is for taking with you and writing down exactly what you did when you did it. Because this is your plan, this is what you want to do. But we all know plans don't always work.
Sometimes you forgot something. That's why we have that actual trick.
So sometimes we do better circumstances, raining, or something that we can get out of the
Yeah, so maybe it was gonna be on June 7th when I was gonna see Napa Cabbage. It was a really nice day, and I knew it was gonna rain the next day. So yeah, we'd go out to the field to work one day and then see a day later.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
So I guess the base this example on for the Napa Cabbage, to harvest it. So what if you have CSA and you're trying to put stuff regularly, how do you construct successions and stuff?
Yes. So that's a very good question. And you used a word that I wanted to explain, which is called successions, or what's called succession planting, which means that you're planting the same crop over and over again to try to have it for a long period of time. So if you want to eat salad every week during the summer, you can't plant salad once and then eat it every week. Just the plant doesn't work like that. So you'd have to keep planting the salad and keep planting it. I'm going to pull up a plan that I did last year for our succession planting. And hopefully that will provide some oh boy. Okay. I'm just going to highlight one row right here, or one group. Okay, so what this is a plan for is it's a plan for cilantro, and I wanted 10 pounds every week, except for this week of July 4th, where the guy who wanted it was out of town. Yeah?
Can you zoom in potentially a little bit?
Absolutely. Possibly? There it is. Okay. So we don't need to look at the entire plan because it was going to go for a long time. So this is cilantro, and I wanted 10 pounds every week. And so what I did is I wrote down the days that I was going to harvest it. So this would be like similar to a CSA. So I was going to harvest 10 pounds on June 12th, 19th, 26th, nothing on the 3rd, keep on going. And what I thought about as I was making this plan was that cilantro you can kind of harvest for about 2 weeks. And that's different knowledge, that there's different amounts of time you can harvest different crops. But I knew that cilantro would last about 2 weeks and then it would be bad. So what I did is I took every 2 weeks and I grouped them together into a planting. So this first planting was for the first 2 weeks of harvesting cilantro. So I planted the cilantro I wanted to harvest on June 12th and June 19th on the same day. I did the same thing for the next planting. So for the second planting of cilantro, I only needed 10 pounds because he was out of town. So I was going to do a smaller planting. So I grouped the harvest dates into chunks where I knew I could harvest off of the same plant. That's called succession planting. Yes?
Did you base your direct seeding date based on the first harvest date, or did you choose something in the middle?
I based my direct seeding date on the first harvest date, which in retrospect was a mistake. I should have chosen a date in the middle. But I based it off of the first day. So I wanted to harvest 20 pounds total of cilantro, and I said that I wanted to harvest that on June 12th. So then I counted back the days to maturity to know what day I should plant.
Direct seed is in April 20, April 25, right?
Yep. Yeah, so what I figured out, this is kind of like a quick look into my brain, but it was that I was going to direct seed it. I was going to direct seed it on April 20th, and I was going to direct seed 25 feet of a bed. Similarly, I did the same thing for Thai basil. But this was something that I transplanted. So I knew I was going to transplant it. I needed 45 feet of it, and that meant 135 plants. And I was going to do that on May 15th. And these were all like, I was just making big guesses on all of this, but not great. It worked really, really well at first, and then it got too hot, and things didn't do very well. And then he stopped ordering, and so then it went worse. But
talk about the holy basil because I've been trying to plant that in time. Can you explain it?
yours died?
The holy basil I tried last year, couldn't plant it.
Really?
Because I don't know what.
Yes, so what I learned about these basils is that they need a lot of light to germinate. And so I had a really hard time getting them to germinate quickly at first because I was putting too much soil on top of them. So I ended up planting them basically on top of the soil and leaving them out in the greenhouse, and that worked great. Yeah.
Why didn't you leave it in the greenhouse? Don't they do well in containers?
Yeah, I didn't have like the money or the soil or the space to do that.
What was the question?
Just like leaving basil, like herbs in the greenhouse in containers, because they do well.
Yeah, it would have done really well.
How tall do they go?
Yes.
The holy basil, so actually, Amy, I did some in a hoop house. I put the first planting in our hoop house. And those did really well. And they got maybe 2.5 feet tall. Yeah. So I guess the quick answer to your question is that I list out, if I'm trying to plan a succession and make my greenhouse plan for a succession, I break it into the number of harvests that I want to have, and I assign a date to each harvest.
How do you find information about, like you said, for instance, for the cilantro, you can harvest it. How do you find that information to know the range?
Well, Laura and I had this debate about whether we were going to hand out yet another worksheet that had that information on it, and I was like, oh no, we don't need that. But we do. I'm trying to see if it is.
I can also bring it next time and also email it or put it on the Google Drive. We made a little cheat sheet.
My question was like for the cilantro example, she said that she knew she could harvest it over 2 periods.
Oh,
So that's
right.
why they're grouped like in 2-week planting days. It's like how do you find out that information for different crops? Right. Yeah.
So one way would be the worksheet. Another way, I would imagine that you could just like try Googling that to see, but the sheet will be helpful. Yeah.
Can I have your format? Can you email that? Because this year my plan is Asia green and your items or my crops included. So
Yes, I will email this to you.
Just put it up on Google.
We'll put it up on the Google Drive.
Okay.
This has, I mean, I'm happy to share all of this has all of the crop plan information for like everything that we grew last year, or that I grew last year. So I will put this on the Google Drive.
So can you just say that one more time? So for this launch, you said it didn't work because you based the date on.
So there were a couple problems. The main problem with this, well, the cilantro did way better than the basil did because I was much more comfortable growing cilantro. And what would have been better, well, okay, so what happened is I based my planting date on the first day that I wanted to harvest it. So I based it on the first of every pair of dates. And so what happened is that date rolled around and the cilantro looked amazing. And so I would harvest half of it and deliver that. And then cilantro grows quickly enough that by the time the week rolled around, and it was like the middle of summer, so it was hotter than heck, it was like, looked not that good. So if I would do this again, I would choose like June 15th, and I would base it on that, and you'd be harvesting slightly smaller plants for the first one, and then better looking plants for the second one. Any other questions about greenhouse plans? Laura?
Do you want to talk about the records that we can keep? I know we already talked about it on the greenhouse plan, but you could also show.
On the field planting plan? Yes. So this is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, just a reminder.
Yeah, so this is a great reminder that like the greenhouse plan where we have space for what you actually did, on the field planting plan, we have space for what you actually do. And it's really important that you keep this. So we want to plant this Napa cabbage on April 20th, but I can almost guarantee you that we're not going to be able to do it because it's going to be too cold or it's going to be too wet or the tractor will have broken. So we'll likely plant it later. So what that means is that you'll want to like record the actual date that you do this. And this is a big stumbling block for a lot of people. It's really hard to be in the field and you're all dirty and you're watering things and before you know it, you're rushing to get things planted. Before you know it, it's like 3 days later and you forgot to write down that you actually planted your Napa cabbage on May 1st. So number one is try as hard as you can to like record it on this paper copy. But there are multiple ways that you can keep these records. So one is on this paper copy. Two, I mean, you can come up with whatever you want. So the thing that's important is that we have records. We need to know for our organic certification, if you're farming at Big River Farms, every planting date for everything you do, every greenhouse seeding date for everything you do. One thing I discovered last year, or that our inspector told us last year, is that things like a phone picture work. So other ways to keep records, if this doesn't work for you, is every time you transplant, you could whip your phone out and take a picture of what you're transplanting. And that has a date on it, and it has what you're doing. You also could like record it on like a memo or something on your phone.
Notepad and dictated.
Yep.
Planted on this date.
Yep. So basically any way that you can capture this information and keep it and not lose it is great. But we do need to have it.
Why are those dates important to certify?
Because, okay, those dates are important to the certifier because part of what they're doing is making sure that what you harvested and sold as certified organic is like something that's reasonable to have happened on your farm. Because they want to make sure that, and this is more of a problem with bigger farms, where like you might be growing some conventional carrots, and you're also growing organic carrots, and you harvested your conventional carrots and sold them as organic. So they're trying to like trace back to make sure that like what you've sold as like something that is legally defined as certified organic is something that could probably have come from your farm. So if you sold carrots in like the beginning of June as certified organic, but you planted your first batch of carrots in the middle of May, that would be like a red flag to them. So it'd be like, carrots do not grow in 3 weeks. So they're just trying to make sure that that you're telling the truth about what you're selling and growing.
I understand.
It is sometimes really hard. Like last year, I have parsnip in the spring, and so good thing that I have my grandson with me, and so we pulled the parsnip. No, the year before, and so they not believe at all. They not trust, and they say we need picture, any picture you can do, and my son say, okay, maybe we're gonna use the picture, and then we pulling the parsnip. And my grandson was pulling the parsnip in March 28th. We pulling from the ground, and so he took that picture and he sent it to the plate where we saw it. They really trust you that it's from the ground for that year, and that's how they keep track. They track you really well, you know, and you need to keep really well a good record keeping too. A picture, like Molly said, is really, really helpful. Yeah, I find out it's really helpful. And also talk about the day you're transplanting. I do that time. Every farmer is really busy, and so I bundle a stick. I sharp the stick. I have my permanent marker with me in the car. I put the stick in the back of my trunk. And when I seeding this kind of transplant, I don't have time to write in my book. They just write in there and stick in there really tight in the bag. And so when you finish, you're coming back and record that. That is how another lazy thing for me. It's really hard too.
You have a bag of sticks in your car, and you, with the sharpened bottoms, and then you write on the stick what you're planting, and you put the stick in the ground where you planted it.
The day
Yeah, and then you can go back and write it down afterwards.
Yeah, and when you're finished, then you go back and you write it, because it's really dirty that time too. And gonna rain next 3 hours, you need to rush, you know. If you don't have time to write, then just pull the stick and write it, stick in it, and keep going. That is the other way. Anything we need to cover, Laura? Is something we missed it?
It's possible. Do we have homework for next week?
Well, I guess something that I can say is that these are plans that we want you all to be working on, and if you are a shared plot farmer, you're lucky because we just did your plan in class. But for everybody else, these plans, especially your greenhouse plan, we want to get done by the 1st of March. And so that's on your assignments and deadlines sheet. And so you guys can work on that as your homework.
And in fact, you can't plant in the greenhouse until you have your greenhouse plan.
Yes, so if you